Welcome to the Two Beans in a Pod. Today, we're diving straight into the deeply unsettling case of Jeffrey Epstein. Specifically, we want to look at the potential machinery behind his alleged blackmail activities.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just the horrific abuse, which is obviously central. But these tendrils, they seem to reach into high finance, maybe intelligence agencies, powerful people.
Exactly. And you showed some really compelling material, so our mission today really is to try and dissect some of these intricate connections, see if we can get a clearer picture of the underlying mechanisms.
Okay. Well, one thing that immediately jumps out is Epstein's start, his entry into Wall Street at Bear Stearns. Stories kind of conflict, don't they?
They really do. Was it just a chance meeting with Alan A. Greenberg, or was it something more deliberate?
And that's the key question, isn't it? If it was just luck, well, okay, he was a good networker. Yeah. But if someone placed him there?
Then who? And why Bear Stearns? It puts him in a powerhouse right away.
Mm-hmm. And that connects potentially to the Bronfman family talk, the Seagram connection.
Right, the insider trading allegations. Never proven, of course, but the whispers were there.
Persistent whispers. It puts him near massive wealth and influence extremely early in his career. Was he just, learning the ropes, or was he already part of something bigger?
That's the million-dollar question. And then you have Stephen Hoffenberg's claims, which are, well, they're explosive.
They really are. Hoffenberg says Epstein wasn't just learning finance. He claims Epstein was actively being trained.
Trained in what, though?
Arms trafficking.
Money laundering.
By people like Adnan Khashoggi and Sir Douglas Leese.
Wow. Okay. And supposedly for Israeli interests and UK operations.
That's the allegation. Now, look, Hoffenberg's own credibility is complicated. He has his own history.
Sure. You have to take that with a grain of salt.
But what makes you pause is the corroborating stuff. Khashoggi was apparently an Epstein client after Bear Stearns. Leese is in Epstein's infamous Black Book. And Epstein later had this relationship with Leese's son. So it doesn't prove Hoffenberg is right, but it suggests, more than just a casual link between Epstein and these pretty heavy-hitting figures.
It definitely suggests a deeper connection. How does a young guy, relatively speaking, end up in that kind of company, allegedly involved in those kinds of activities? Was he being groomed?
It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
And that leads straight into the tower's financial partnership with Hoffenberg.
Right, they were partners. Hoffenberg said they traveled the world together, raising billions illegally. He called Epstein his wingman.
His indispensable wingman, yeah. That period must have given Epstein incredible experience in complex finance, maybe the illicit side too.
And Hoffenberg claimed he fired Epstein eventually for stealing too much.
He did claim that. Their split is a bit murky too, but it hints at a potential pattern, doesn't it? Exploiting trust, maybe playing fast and loose with ethics, or worse.
And the lawyer connection is interesting too. Hoffenberg using the same lawyers as Robert Maxwell when he was eyeing the New York Post.
Exactly. It shows how these networks, they sort of overlap. Like there's a shared playbook, maybe a shared pool of service providers within these very high-stakes circles.
A playbook for operating in the gray areas or maybe outside them entirely.
Potentially. And then the lawsuits against Epstein linked to the Towers fraud, plus the confusion over whether Hoffenberg really cooperated with investigators. It just adds more layers of smoke.
It makes it really hard to pin down Epstein's precise role, but it definitely shows how murky his financial world was right from early on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's pull back a bit, look at the broader context. Organized crime, intelligence links. We see mentions of figures like Arthur Green in Chicago.
Right, described as the brains of the rackets, supposedly handling investments for Meyer Lansky, even connected to James Roosevelt.
What's the relevance of someone like Green to the Epstein story?
Well, it shows a historical precedent, right? Organized crime figures allegedly moving money, having political connections. It demonstrates that this kind of intersection between power, money, and the underworld, it's not new. It provides a backdrop.
A historical context for powerful people operating outside the usual rules.
Exactly. And then there's that NYPD case, the chickens and the bulls.
Yeah, that's disturbing. Blackmailing closeted gay men, including prominent figures. The FBI takes over, and then poof. Key evidence, the alleged Hoover Kaminsky photos, reportedly disappears.
It's a chilling example of blackmail as a tool for leverage over powerful people with secrets. And the fact the FBI got involved and evidence vanished. That speaks volumes about the potential stakes involved when powerful people are compromised.
It really does. It shows how vulnerability can be weaponized, a theme that seems very relevant here.
Extremely relevant. Now, shift to Robert Maxwell, his network was vast. We're talking alleged links to Eastern European organized crime, like Semyon Mogilevich.
And Maxwell supposedly helped Mogilevich-linked companies get into the U.S.
That's been reported, yes. It raises serious questions about Maxwell's own dealings and, crucially, the environment his daughter Ghislaine grew up in and was exposed to.
His reach, his connections. It could have provided a model, maybe even groundwork, for the kind of operation Epstein and Ghislaine are alleged to have run later.
It certainly provides a potential framework for understanding how these things might operate on a global scale. And Ghislaine, of course, she's pivotal.
Her official role seemed normal enough, right? Special projects at the Daily News, her corporate gifts company.
On the surface, yes. But then you layer on the allegations, her central role, allegedly, in a sexual blackmail operation with Epstein, and the really explosive part, reportedly doing it on behalf of Israeli intelligence.
That's where all these threads, finance, crime, politics, and now intelligence, seem to potentially knot together.
That alleged Israeli intelligence angle is huge. If true, it suggests a state-level dimension. It moves it way beyond just personal depravity into geopolitics, potentially.
Okay, let's pivot to Leslie Wexner. Epstein's incredibly close relationship with the billionaire founder of The Limited. How did that start?
Well, Alan Ace Greenberg pops up again. He knew Wexner's associate Marvin Petrie, and of course he knew Epstein from Bear Stearns, so there's a link there.
Another connection through Greenberg. Interesting. And what about this Frank Walsh character, Wexner's business partner?
Francis J. Frank Walsh. Yeah, reports link him to the Genovese crime family. And his trucking company was the main transporter for The Limited.
A partner with alleged mafia ties. That seems unusual for a major CEO like Wexner.
It does raise eyebrows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Suggests Wexner's business world might have intersected with some, let's say, less conventional networks.
And then there's the Shapiro murder file. This Columbus police document supposedly pointed fingers at Wexner.
Reports suggest it raised scrutiny about Wexner regarding the murder of Arthur Shapiro, who was a lawyer for The Limited. Shapiro was apparently about to testify in a tax case involving Wexner associates.
And the file was suppressed, and Wexner had close ties to local police.
That's the allegation. The murder itself was described as mob style, happening right before his testimony. It's deeply troubling and raises serious questions about potential obstruction influence.
If a police file could be suppressed, it speaks to immense local power and potential impunity, doesn't it?
It certainly fuels those suspicions, especially even the timing and nature of Shapiro's death. But then you have to contrast this with Wexner's public image.
Right. Massive philanthropy, huge donations to the United Jewish Appeal, the Wexner Foundation.
It's a stark contrast, a jarring juxtaposition, as you say. It shows how public benevolence and, well, potentially darker dealings can exist side by side. Philanthropy can build reputation, influence.
Okay, let's talk about Epstein, intelligence, and political figures more directly. There were claims Epstein had some kind of edge in currency trading.
Yeah, mentions of an almost uncanny ability to profit in currency markets. If true, how? Did he have inside information? Was it market manipulation?
And how would that tie into blackmail?
Well, that kind of financial power, or the ability to get that kind of sensitive information, could certainly be a tool, either used directly, financially, or just demonstrating reach and access.
Access. Which brings us to the White House visits. Multiple visits during the Clinton administration.
Facilitated by Mark Middleton, who had his own issues with the Chinagate scandal.
Right. That frequency of visits, given Middleton's background, it's definitely notable. What was Epstein doing there? Who was he meeting? What information or connections was he gathering or maybe leveraging?
We don't know for sure, but it suggests a level of access that warrants scrutiny. And think about Robert Maxwell again. Around the time Ghislaine and Epstein allegedly started their operation, Maxwell reportedly sought consultations with James Baker, John Tower, Robert Keith Gray, all guys with intelligence community connections.
That timing does seem significant, doesn't it? Seeking advice from intel veterans just as this alleged operation is kicking off.
It's suggestive, yeah. Like maybe he wanted guidance or even help from people who knew that world. Their networks, their expertise could have been valuable.
And Ghislaine herself was apparently trying hard to get into New York high society, trying to connect with the Kennedys for her father.
Right. Building social and political capital, that pursuit of influence, it could have been strategic, right? Building a network, identifying potential targets, maybe even gathering information.
A strategic social climb. Okay, and one more piece here. Epstein apparently trying to get CIA-linked airlines into Columbus, Ohio.
Aero Air and Southern Air Transport. Both have documented histories in covert operations, like Iran-Contra.
And you wanted them to serve as Wexner's company, the Limited.
That's the report. It feels like another connection, potentially linking Epstein, Wexner, and these shadowy clandestine activities. Using those specific airlines, it strengthens the feeling of connection to covert networks.
Okay, let's look at Epstein's later activities after Clinton left office.
Their relationship continued. Lots of flights on Epstein's private plane, the Lolita Express. This coincided with the setting up of the Clinton Foundation.
So, a close association with a former president, right as he's building this major global foundation. It raises questions about Epstein's potential influence there, doesn't it? The nature of their interactions during that period.
Legitimate questions, absolutely. And Epstein himself tried to pivot, didn't he? Rebrand as a tech guy.
Yeah, the tech investor image. He set up a company called Southern Trust, focused on DNA data mining.
Which is unsettling. Moving into tech, specifically into something as sensitive as DNA data, it suggests he was maybe looking for new avenues of influence, new forms of potentially compromising information.
And the people around Epstein, like Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, he had links to Israeli tech companies with intelligence ties.
Carbon 9/11, Toka, companies linked to reports to Israeli intelligence. So figures associated with Epstein connecting to these specific kinds of tech firms, it brings us kind of full circle.
Back to those early Hoffenberg allegations about Israeli intelligence links.
Yeah, exactly. It reinforces that recurring theme. Connections between Epstein's circle and individuals or companies tied to Israeli intelligence seem to pop up again and again. It suggests it might be a really significant dimension of his whole network.
So when you step back and look at all this, it's clear the Epstein story is so much bigger than just one monstrous individual.
Oh, absolutely.
This web, finance, organized crime, intelligence networks, powerful political and business figures. It paints a picture of a system that's complex and potentially deeply corrupt.
And the recurring theme, as you said, is the intersection with people tied to intelligence and clandestine operations. That seems critical.
Which brings us to the big question for you listening. How do all these interconnected elements, the finance, the alleged crime links, the politics, the intelligence whispers, how do they help explain the why? Why could Epstein operate for so long, seemingly with such impunity?
Well, if you entertain the possibility of a really sophisticated blackmail operation, one that's maybe interwoven with intelligence gathering,
Okay.
and maybe protected by powerful people in finance and politics who might have been compromised themselves, that could explain it. Fear of exposure at the highest levels could create a very powerful shield.
Exactly. The sheer number of powerful connections we've touched on today suggests his alleged blackmail wasn't just personal. It might have been a tool in a much larger game involving much bigger players and stakes. If you found this exploration insightful, definitely hit that like button, and please subscribe for more deep dives like this one.
Yeah, this look into Epstein's connections really reveals a disturbing landscape where power, influence, money, and alleged illicit activities seem incredibly tangled. It leaves you wondering about the broader implications, doesn't it? For society, for institutions.
It really does. A lot to think about. Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod. If you are interested in the book, please order it from the link below.